It's time for Fresh Oil with singer-songwriter and pastor Keith Manley, a program designed to minister the gospel of God's grace and to bring fresh oil to the brokenhearted. And now, with today's program, Pastor Keith Manley.
Welcome back to Fresh Oil. I'm Keith Manley, and I'm so glad you're with me today as we continue this new series on threshold moments, when God meets us at doorways and everything changes. Last time we established the biblical foundation for threshold theology by looking at the story of the Passover that we find in Exodus chapter 12, one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible. We saw how the blood on the doorposts marked the boundary between death and life, between slavery and freedom. That blood-marked threshold was Israel's first great redemptive moment. Today we're going to fast forward about 40 years. The generation that left Egypt, they've all died now in the wilderness. Only Joshua and Caleb are left. And their children, a new generation, are camped on the east side of the Jordan River. They're ready to enter the Promised Land. And the first city that they're going to conquer is the city of Jericho. But before the walls fell, before the trumpet sound, before Joshua leads the people across the Jordan, there's a woman, a Gentile woman, a Canaanite woman. And not just any Canaanite woman, but she was a prostitute, the Bible says. Her name was Rahab. And she's about to have a threshold moment that will not only save her life, but put her in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. If you're writing the story of Israel's conquest of Canaan, would you include a prostitute as one of the heroes? Would you give her a significant role in God's plan? And would you make sure that her name was remembered for all time? Probably not. We tend to write our spiritual heroes as clean and respectable, morally upright people. But God doesn't write his story that way. He includes the Rahabs, the broken, the marginalized, the unlikely, the ones that nobody else would choose. And the threshold moment that saves Rahab isn't even a doorway in the traditional sense. It's a window in the city wall. And hanging from that window is a scarlet cord. It's a visual echo of the blood on the Passover doorposts that marked her house as a place of refuge when judgment comes. So let's dive into the story today, Joshua chapter 2, and I'm going to give you the historical context, the geographical details, and the Hebrew word studies, and the theological significance of what happens here in this story with Rahab and Jericho. Because this isn't just an interesting Old Testament story. This is a picture of the gospel. This is about how God saves people who have no claim on his mercy except faith. So let me get started by setting the scene geographically, because where this happens matters. I've been to Jericho a number of times, and there's a sign just outside of Jericho that says, the oldest city in the world. Jericho was one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Archaeologists have found some evidence of a settlement there dating back thousands of years. And by the time Joshua and the Israelites arrived, around 1400 BC, Jericho had been a fortified city for ages. And the fortifications, they were impressive. Do you know Jericho had a double wall system? There was an outer wall about 6 feet thick and an inner wall about 12 feet thick. They used to race chariots on top of the walls. And between the two walls was a space about 12 to 15 feet. And in that space, people built houses. Poor people mostly, because people who couldn't afford property inside the main city would literally build their homes in the wall, with one side of the house against the outer wall and one side against the inner wall. That's where Rahab lived. Her house was built into the wall structure itself, and that detail that she lived in the wall is going to become crucially important to the story today. Now let's look at the text. It's found in Joshua chapter 2 and verse 1. And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, Go view the land, especially Jericho. And they went, and they came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and they lodged there. Now, right away, we need to address something. The Hebrew word here is zonah, and it unambiguously means prostitute or harlot. Some people have tried to soften this, saying maybe she just ran an inn, and maybe she was just a single woman. Maybe the text didn't really mean what it says, but the New Testament confirms it. In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 31, it puts her in the Hall of Fame, calls her Rahab the prostitute. James 2:25 calls her Rahab the prostitute. So the text here is not ambiguous. It was a fact. Rahab was a prostitute, and God chose her to be a part of his plan. Now, why did spies go to her house to begin with? What's a nice Jewish boy doing ending up in the inn of the prostitute? Well, there are a few practical reasons. First, a prostitute's house, it would be a place where strangers could just come and go without attracting attention. Men visited prostitutes. Nobody would think twice about seeing unfamiliar faces there. Secondly, prostitutes often knew things. They heard things that men whispered in secret, that they talked about. Information flowed through places like Rahab's house. But I also believe there's a deeper reason the spies ended up at Rahab's house. Providence, something I believe in greatly. God's sovereign orchestration of our steps. These men needed to end up at the one house in Jericho where someone believed in the God of Israel. And that house belonged to the prostitute named Rahab. Let's continue with verse 2. And it was told to the king of Jericho, Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. And then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. So the spies have now been discovered. Someone saw them. Someone reported them. And the king sends soldiers to Rahab's house, demanding that she hand them over. Now, this is her moment. This is her threshold. She has to make a choice. Does she side with her own people, her own city, her own king, or does she side with the God of Israel and protect the spies? Now, here's what's remarkable, my friend. Rahab has already made her choice before the soldiers even arrive. In verses 4 through 7, it says this, But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. And she said, True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. Now Rahab lied to protect the spies. We could spend a whole program talking about the ethics of this. Is lying ever justified? And what about speaking truth and all of that? But that's not the point of the story. The point is that Rahab has chosen sides. She committed treason against her own city, and she's risking her life. Why? Because she believes in the God of Israel, friend. Look at what she says in verse 8 through 11. This is one of the most remarkable confessions of faith in the entire Old Testament. It says this in verse 8, Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you defeated in destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God, in the heavens above and on the earth below. Did you catch that? The Lord your God. He is the God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. This is a monotheistic confession from a polytheistic Canaanite.
The Canaanites had many gods, but Rahab confessed the God of Israel as the God of the heavens and the earth. This is a declaration that Yahweh, the covenant God of Israel, is not just one God among many. He is the God, the only God, the God of heaven and earth. Where did Rahab get this faith? She heard. Verse 10 said, "We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you." In verse 11, as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted. See, Rahab heard the stories. The exodus from Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the defeat of the two kings, Sihon and Og. And unlike everyone else in Jericho, who heard the same stories and responded with fear and defiance, Rahab heard and she believed. This is faith, friend. Romans 10:17, it says, "So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ." Rahab heard about what God had done, and she believed, and that faith led her to act. Now look at what she asked for in verses 12 and 13. This is important. "Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." Rahab wants salvation, not just for herself, but for her family. She knows that judgment is coming. She knows Jericho is going to fall, and she's asking for mercy. And the spies agree. Verses 14 through 16 says this, "And the men said to her, 'Our lives for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you.' Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, 'Go into the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go on your way.'" Wow, smart woman. Here it is, the window, the threshold moment in Rahab's life. Her house is on the wall, the outer wall of Jericho, so she has a window that opens to the outside, to the wilderness, to freedom. And she lets the spies down through that window with a rope. That window becomes a threshold, a boundary between inside and outside, between captivity and freedom, between death and between life. You see, sometimes those thresholds cause us to make a choice. Thresholds and doorways in our life, they make us choose a side. Rahab chose the side of the God of Israel. She chose to align herself with the 12 spies who had come to spy out the land. Now this week, we're teaching a very important topic as we deal with thresholds and doorways in our life that God brings us to. And we have to respond. We have to make a choice. We have to choose a side. And it's kind of unusual, but once again, we're going to have to make a part 2 tomorrow for the story of Rahab. This is one of the most incredible stories in all of Scripture, that God would choose a woman who had such a bad past, and he would say, because of her faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God says, I want that woman to be in the genealogy of my son. So tomorrow we'll continue with part 2 of the story of Rahab and her threshold, which was in a window on the wall of Jericho, and she chose to let down the spies with her scarlet cord and let them go to safety while they were being searched for by the people of Jericho. What a great week on Fresh Oil. Thank you for joining me, friend. I so appreciate you being here today. See you again tomorrow as we do part 2 of the story of Rahab.
Thanks for joining us today for Fresh Oil with Pastor Keith Manley. Fresh Oil is an outreach of Grace Family Church in Rockford, Illinois, and can be heard each weekday at this same time. You can reach us online at weneedgod.com. Until next time, remember, God's love for you is unconditional, and He makes His mercies new every morning.